God förmiddag, välkomna ska ni vara till ett specialavsnitt, ett extra avsnitt inför börsveckan, vecka 41. Jag heter Johan Lundstedt och jag har som vanligt med mig Jonas Olavi, välkommen.
Tackar, kul att vara här igen, och det händer ju väldigt mycket under veckan, så att vi tyckte att det är dags att uppdatera med några slides, även om det var blott 2 dagar sedan vi kom med vår senaste inspelningen. Och vi vill också passa på att hälsa en väldigt intressant gäst som har en spännande fond att presentera. Johan.
Ja, vi har en spännande gäst från Polen Capital, Dan Davidovich. A warm welcome.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Jonas. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so we're gonna hear a little bit more about your fund that is called Focus Growth.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So that's going to be very exciting. But first of all, we're going to look at today's agenda.
Ja, och vi börjar titta på svensk inflation. Det går åt rätt håll. Vad kommer hända med Riksbankens styrränta? Och vad händer, kanske än viktigare, vad händer med dina bolåneräntor framöver? Och sen så sen är det full fart i fabriken. Vilken fabrik då? Kunderna säger crazy och insane. Vad menar de egentligen? Och sen måste man ju nästan i realtid kommentera Kina, eftersom det hoppar hej vilt på börserna där. Och sen så kommer då Dan att presentera den här intressanta tillväxtfonden. Men svensk inflation, avläsningen för september hamnade på 1,6% år över år, och den tidigare avläsningen var på 1,9%. Det går åt rätt håll här då. Så det finns inga hinder för Riksbanken att fortsätta sänka räntan, och nästa tillfälle man har då, det är den 7 november, 2 dagar efter det amerikanska valet och timmarna innan Federal Reserve förväntas sänka sin ränta. Och hur ligger förväntansbilden? Ja, man tror ju generellt att det är kvartingar man kommer sänka med 0,25 procentenheter. Men om man tittar på den implicita prisbilden så tror man faktiskt lite mer då, och en del banker har gått ut med det blir nog 0,5. Vi får se. Det blir vad det blir lite grann, och om man tittar på den här prognosbilden så kan man konstatera att dina bolåneräntor bör ha sjunkit med ungefär 1,25 procentenheter till och med mars nästa år, och det är väl bra. Då kan man ju till exempel öka sparandet, och varför inte hos Alpcot då, som har ett rabatterat fondtorg och diskretionära fond- och aktieportföljer, och då tar man ju kontakt med en rådgivare. Det finns kontaktuppgifter på vår hemsida, och du kommer ju då strax få höra om en tillväxtorienterad fond som kanske skulle kunna vara intressant för de som vill ha den typen av strategier.
Ja, Jonas, det är ju ett hett tips då, så att säga, att spara pengarna samtidigt som Riksbanken hoppas att man ska börja konsumera för de här extra pengarna. Men vårt stalltips är väl att man ska spara mer istället då.
Det tycker jag absolut, och det får man ju bestämma själv, men det gäller alltid att bygga upp en buffert och ett sparande, och är det rabatterat så får man ju en högre förväntad avkastning än annars. Du hittar säkert din favoritfond som du har kanske i din depå hos en bank eller hos någon nätmäklare där avgifterna är väldigt, väldigt höga. Hos oss får du samma fond fast till rabatt. Ja, det har varit full fart i fabriken, och då tänker jag på Taiwan Semiconductor. De rapporterar månadsvis försäljning, och det går som tåget, och vi har ju sett flera nyckelfaktorer som har gjort att vi är inte särskilt överraskade. Och det är ju framförallt då AI-relaterat som då driver utvecklingen. Det är ju inte egentligen den stora produkten hos Taiwan Semiconductor, utan de gör ju datachip som ska in i PCs, i mobiltelefoner och annat, fordon inte minst då. Så det intressanta att se här nu är ju att just AI driver den här tillväxttalen. Så de slog inte bara sina egna förväntningar för månadsförsäljning utan även marknadens förväntningar. Och vad säger kunderna då egentligen? Ja, Honhai som ju gör i princip alla iPhones samt är väldigt stora på servrar. De säger att AI-efterfrågan är crazy. Nvidias vd nämnde tidigare att efterfrågan på deras Blackwell-chip är insane. Och vi har tidigare sett en rapport från Micron som är minneschip-leverantören att de rapporterar både högre än prognos och höjde också guidance. Och de sa att efterfrågan inom just AI är mycket hög. Och Micron de levererar då chip till Blackwell-produkten. Och det är klart att allting hänger ju på Nvidias explosiva efterfrågan och orderboksuppbyggande av det här Blackwell-chippet. Så allting som hänger med i den där svängen gynnas ju såklart då. Och vi har en del sådana bolag i Alpcot Equities som jag förvaltar. Som man då kan handla till en blygsam förvaltningsavgift på våran hemsida. Och det har varit volatilt under sensommaren, började i första veckan i juli när många av de här stora gigantiska techbolagens utgifter och intäkter från AI ifrågasattes. Men det där var nog bara mer en ursäkt att plocka hem lite vinster, för bolagen går väldigt, väldigt bra. Så utsikterna för gott avslut tycker jag med de innehav som vi har i Alpcot Equities ser goda ut. Men det får man ju naturligtvis bedöma själv. Och hur kan man veta vad det är för aktier i den här fonden? Jo, man går in i strategirapporten och längst bak så finns såklart innehavslistan på hela fonden. Men jag tänkte också nämna lite grann, det är väldigt volatilt i Kina. Om man tittar på Shanghai Shenzhen så steg den från botten till toppen med 41% och sen har det rekylerat ner då. Och vad som väntas härnäst då, det är att Finansdepartementet kommer att hålla presskonferens på lördag. Och analyshusen tävlar nu om att kasta fram siffror på höga belopp på stimulanser som då väntas, och i Kina så är ju spelet att man ska få igång den privata konsumtionen. Det var det man gjorde och som vi också presenterade bland annat då i måndags. Och 2000-3000 miljarder yuan, alltså ansenliga belopp förväntas då, och mindre än det här bör ju då förmodligen ses som besvikelser. Men det här är ju någonting som är till för kineserna, inte för utlänningar. Så att det är möjligen att kineserna tycker att det som då presenteras på lördag potentiellt är någonting som är bra för dem. Och att börserna då kan fortsätta upp. Så att väldigt skakigt, jättesvårt att ha någon uppfattning om vart de här börserna är på väg. Men nu tänkte jag att vi ska byta språk och fond. Tackar för mig och welcome back Dan from Polen Capital.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the Polen Capital Focus Growth strategy. It's a strategy that we've been managing for almost 36 years now. It's a U.S. large cap, long only strategy. And what makes Polen Capital a little bit unique is, first of all, we are growth equity managers, but we are trying to preserve our clients' capital first and then grow it. And we think we can do that by owning a portfolio of only the most competitively advantaged and financially superior companies that we think exist in the United States. So the mandate for focus growth is to have a concentrated portfolio. It's typically around 20 to 25 companies that have to meet very strict financial criteria in order to be considered for investment. So all of our companies have to have cash-rich balance sheets. They have to have excess free cash flow every year. They have to have high returns on capital. They have to have stable or increasing profit margins, and they have to have organic revenue growth that's better than the average company. And so what you'll see in our portfolio is, companies that you probably know quite well. And you'll see, companies like Amazon, like Alphabet, like Visa and MasterCard. These are well-known, very large companies, but companies that also have very strong competitive advantages, exceptionally strong balance sheets, and many, many years of growth ahead of them. And so we think that's very, very important that we only invest in those type of companies. The other thing that makes our strategy unique is that we've been able to deliver earnings growth, so portfolio weighted average earnings growth, that's been about 15% per year for very long, 30, our whole 36-year track record. And that earnings growth is what drives the underlying return of the fund itself. So over any long-term time horizon, you're going to see that mid-teens earnings growth and mid-teens returns. That's exactly what it's been, gross of fees over time. And so our ability to continue to put together that concentrated portfolio that delivers mid-teens earnings growth is crucial. It's very important for us to do to get that earnings growth, to maintain that earnings growth the easiest possible way we can. We tend to be very conservative people. So we're not trying to chase some of the fastest growing companies out there. And certainly we would like to own fast growing companies, but we want more stability of earnings growth, consistent earnings growth over many, many years to hopefully drive the same kind of returns that we've been able to have in the past. So earnings growth from very advantaged companies is really what we're trying to do. The other thing that is somewhat unique about our portfolio is even though 15% earnings growth is very fast, right? The average US company only grows its earnings at a mid-single digit rate. So our companies grow significantly faster with more durability, less cyclicality to them. That's really what we're trying to do. But we're also accomplishing that with a portfolio that has both growth and safety built into it. And what I mean by that is some of the companies in our portfolio grow slower than that 15% that we're targeting, but they do it with tremendous stability. We often find companies like that in the healthcare space or in the consumer staples space, where they may grow earnings 10, 11, 12, 13%, still very, very good by US standards, but they do it with tremendous stability. And our expectation is that stability of the businesses will lead to stability of stock price as well. And so in periods of drawdown in the market, oftentimes those safety type companies end up providing a lot of ballast to the portfolio as well. And so we have this combination of growth and safety. We are typically fully invested at all times. We only want to own the most advantaged growth companies we can find and then pay very reasonable prices, in our opinion, for that. So that's the basic overarching expectation for our portfolio. And this slide that you have here demonstrates that growth and safety, right? So the companies on the left side of this slide are the safety element companies, the United Healthcare's Fisher, Thermo Fisher, Accenture, Abbott. These businesses are that 10 to 13% earnings growth, but with ultimate stability. As you go to the right, the companies grow faster and faster, right? The Shopify's, Amazon, ServiceNow, those will be over 20% earnings growth. These are 5-year estimates for earnings growth. And then there's a lot in between, a lot around that mid-teens percentage range. But every company that you see on here, in our opinion, has very large competitive advantages, exceptional growth prospects, and then is available to us at a price that will allow that return to come through. So that's the overarching theme of focused growth and consistent, durable earnings growth driving, hopefully consistent mid-teens returns.
Great. And one question there. I can see you have both MasterCard and Visa. If you were to pick one, which one do you think has the most potential in, say, 1 year ahead or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've owned both of them for almost 15 years, so we have a very long-term holding period. And if we're looking at continuous long-term, they should perform very similarly over time. Their growth rates are not dissimilar from each other. The valuations are not wildly dissimilar from one another. So, and the drivers of long-term growth are actually quite similar between the two. We like owning the entire duopoly. It is a true global duopoly on payments, digital payments globally. So we like it. But if you're looking at a 1-year time frame, like you had suggested, in the very near term, Visa has some regulatory inquiries, especially in the United States and their US debit business, that may be a little bit of a headline risk for the next year, which MasterCard does not have. So maybe if it's a 1-year time horizon, I wouldn't be surprised if MasterCard does a little bit better than Visa, but over the long term, they should be very similar.
Okay, great. So that's comforting to hear, as I have Mastercard in my global fund, not Visa. So on the GLP companies, Novo and Lilly, so you have both. Novo has been retracting a bit. What's your anticipation going forward? The background is that they are now allowed to be sold through the Medicare systems and stuff like that. Can we see, large potentials going forward in sales? What's the catch on those two?
Yeah, Novo and Lilly, similar, are a global duopoly, like Visa and MasterCard, a little bit different in that they will eventually have more competition than Visa and MasterCard do. But Novo and Lilly are a global duopoly on medicines for diabetes and obesity, especially with their GLP-1 franchises. Both companies should be able to grow quite fast. The addressable market for both diabetes, but especially obesity, for these drugs is going to be extremely large. We think measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars of potential revenue to be split between not just Lilly and Novo, but eventually other players coming to market as well. We think the indications for GLP-1s will make this the largest drug class ever seen. And it is very hard to manufacture these drugs too. So it's not easy, even if you get approval to compete, to scale enough to produce enough GLP-1 active ingredient to actually come to market. So it's not easy to do. The Medicare approval is not yet there for obesity. So we are not yet seeing Medicare approval for obesity, nor do we expect it anytime soon. But even without Medicare in the United States, there's broad coverage for these drugs from commercial payers. It is being covered by more and more governments outside the U.S. as well. The potential population that is obese worldwide is approaching 1 billion people. And so that means that the addressable market is quite large. It'll be a fraction of that billion people, but it will be very large over time. Both companies are also developing next generation drugs, some that are also still injectable, some that are oral in formulation, that hopefully will be even more effective and hopefully with even fewer side effects. We don't know that yet. But we think that the market is still tremendous growth for both companies. Novo will grow a little slower than Eli Lilly will, but the valuation on Novo is more attractive than it is on Lilly. Novo has come down a little bit recently, mostly because they had a readout on an oral GLP-1 drug in their pipeline that was less than stellar. That was one that we did not have high hopes for. That one was the less good oral GLP-1 that they had in their pipeline. We have much more optimistic views of their other GLP-1 drugs in their pipeline.
All right. But then when it slumps, what's the strategy? Would you add position, or how do you work that stock?
Yeah, as of the moment, we have not added to it, but at a certain price, if we think that we are getting a really compelling value, that we don't just add or trim on small movements in stock prices, but if we get to a point where we think the return profile is a lot better, then yeah, we could take advantage of it, assuming, of course, that the facts don't change from what we know today.
Yeah. All right. I don't see that many AI companies. I see some vendors, Alphabet, of course, Amazon, ServiceNow, the beneficiary of that, but no NVIDIA. Why not?
Yeah, when we hear that a lot, that it looks like we have very little, if any, AI exposure. I will say we have a lot of generative AI exposure through our cloud service providers, through our software companies, even through Accenture. We think we do have quite a bit of generative AI exposure. It's just not NVIDIA type AI exposure, which is very unique, and really only one company that has that unique profile at the moment. So we do believe that generative AI will be a positive for revenue and earnings growth for many of our companies going forward. NVIDIA is a little bit of a different kind of animal because NVIDIA is a highly cyclical company with basically no recurring revenue. It's a wonderful business. We actually think it's a highly competitively advantaged business run by an exceptionally good management team. But we're at a point in time where with generative AI, there's the build out of a tremendous amount of foundational infrastructure, which is really the GPUs and systems that NVIDIA sells. they are the default provider of the compute that's needed for generative AI today. So there's a massive build out, obviously NVIDIA benefiting from that. But once you've laid that foundational architecture and that technology, you don't just keep doing it over and over and over again. There will be a period of digestion at some point where the large cloud service companies and global internet companies say, we have enough for now. And because there's no recurring revenue for NVIDIA, that will be a problem at some point. We don't know when that'll be for NVIDIA. We don't like riding roller coasters of growth with companies. We want more consistent, durable, year in, year out earnings growth with recurring nature to it. A lot of our software businesses are about 100% recurring revenue. They're subscriptions, right, that you have to pay. You can't just go away for periods of time. And so for us, with that consistent and durable growth is more what we're looking for. It doesn't mean we couldn't own an NVIDIA. It just makes it a bit more difficult for us.
Yeah. Point taken. Okay. Looks like a very interesting and solid portfolio wrapped in the fund. Do you have any last remarks on what to expect? You have a mid double-digit target each year, and you're well ahead of that so far.
Yeah, we do target consistent mid-teens earnings growth, hopefully driving that same kind of return like we've been able to do in the past. And again, doing it the easiest, most consistent way that we can. One thing I'll just mention for those listening that may not spend a lot of their time focused on the US market is the large cap growth segment of the US market has become highly concentrated in a very small number of companies. If you look at an index like the Russell 1000 Growth Index that tracks that part of the market, there's over 500 companies in that index. But yet the 60% of that index is in just 10 technology companies, basically. We run a 23 stock portfolio that has 60% in our top 10. We're always that concentrated. The Russell as a proxy for that part of the market has become even more concentrated than our portfolio has. And we just say very, very careful when you're investing in a market to try to get exposure to a market concentrated without having somebody with a thought process or a team that can make active allocation decisions, because at some point you will not want to own those very large companies at some point. We do own in our portfolio today, not all of them, as you mentioned. We don't own NVIDIA, we don't own Tesla, but we will at some point not want to own even Apple or Amazon or Microsoft at some point, and that will be a good decision to make, but the index is heavily concentrated in those companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Dan. Interesting fund, good performance, long-term track record. So this is probably for many listeners potentially interesting fund to add to their savings. I thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for letting me join you today.
Thank you very much, Dad. I'm going to take the last part in Swedish to wrap up this episode. Okej, allihopa. Väldigt spännande att lyssna lite på Dan och hans portfölj. Väldigt koncentrerad portfölj som vi tycker om. Fokus på tillväxt, lång erfarenhet. Fonden kommer att få en länk till sig alldeles strax nedanför beskrivningen här. Så att ni kommer kunna handla den till rabatt på vår plattform, givetvis. Hur ska vi avsluta? Sammanfatta veckans avsnitt. Det blir som mittenvecka avsnitt, så ganska kort så. Men vad ska vi säga?
Ja, men en intressant händelseutveckling på marknaderna där vi fått ytterligare bekräftelser på att man fortsätter bygga infrastruktur för glatta livet. De som håller på och tillverkar spadarna är ju de som gynnas. Jag räknar med bra rapporter från flera av de här bolagen, och det skulle kunna få börserna att gilla läget och kanske omfamna de här gigantiska bolagen som ju, precis som Dan sa, har väldigt mycket av de här indexen. De väger väldigt mycket, och då bör ju börsen allmänt lyfta. Och vi väntar oss räntesänkningar framöver. Det här är ju långsam materia, men i november så är det dags igen då att komma upp på podiet för centralbankerna och leverera det som väntas, det vill säga lägre räntor. Men ja, med de orden tycker jag vi rundar av det här. Och som sagt, en bra presentation av Dan för en intressant fond som har funnits länge. Koncentrerad portfölj där man försöker rida starka bolag över tid då.
Det gillar vi verkligen, och vi gillar också starten på den här rapportsäsongen här. Det verkar verkligen vara den riktningen vi vill ha. Väldigt spännande. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone that have been listening. We will be back on Monday. Thank you.